How else? And let me be clear what I mean by this. With which additional letters can we write the impossible universals that we've been discussing? Every man, every woman, all women. How can we write this? Are there other letters that we can draw upon to help us make sense? Recall again that the fundamental fantasy of the big other's existence always founders on the same thing, signifiers of the fact that the other is always already barred, lacking, and incomplete. That's what I just showed you, a signifier of the fact that the big other is only ever the barred other. Now, we typically write all of this as Lacan writes it in the graph of desire, where in the bottom right-hand quadrant you see a capital A that is not barred. There's your full fantastical big other, this treasure trove of signifiers as he was discussing in the early 60s. In the upper left-hand quadrant of the complete graph of desire, this is where you see the image I just showed you, the letters I just showed you, the letters that I pulled directly from chapter 6 of Seminar 18, of a signifier next to a barred A in parens. Typically, these are the letters that we use to document this matter. In Seminar 18, however, and not just in chapter 8, 10 years after the graph of desire, Lacan gives us another letter to work with. It is not the signifier of the barred other that you see in the S with a barred A in parens, but instead, notice this, it is an upside down capital A. The letter that he is bringing to bear on this impossible universal at the level of all men, all women, is an upside down A, an upside down capital A, if we can use words to describe this totally non-verbalizable entity that looks like, as Lacan says multiple times in Seminar 18, a bull's head. Take a capital A, turn it upside down, and you've got the basic etching image of a bull's head. This, however, is not even a letter anymore. It's something different. Big A upside down is not big A right side up, is also not the signifier capital S next to a barred big A. A capital A turned upside down, according to Lacan, is an unverbalizable notation. It is not part of any given spoken discourse. But it can definitely be written on the chalkboard. And that's why it's hilarious. In these lectures that he's giving in 1970, people are like, bro, we can't hear you. We can't hear you in the back. And and he's like, what? What are you saying here? What's going on? He's kind of got this old man. What? Who's saying something? Listen to what else he says, though, in these moments. Someone says, hey, we can't hear you. It's from chapter 6 in Seminar 18. And he says, don't complain that you can't hear me. He's shouting this presumably back at the audience. And he says, what is at stake can only be written on the blackboard. In other words, you don't need to hear anything. What is at stake in Seminar 18 at the level of a discourse that is not a semblance, that is a real discourse, keep going with this in the direction of pure writing. Keep going with this at the level of Chinese and Japanese characters in the margin. Keep going with this at the level of astrological, astronomical phenomena in the night sky. Keep going with this at the level of his blackboard of the night sky. What's at stake here is not something that can or even needs to be said. Yes, it will occasion discourse, hence the seminar. But what he's saying is what's at stake really can only be written. And that's what you see here with the capital A upside down. I dare you to tell me what that is. Say that. Say it. You can't say it. You can say a capital A written upside down as I've done. The only way to account for this is at the level of writing, is at the level of a letter that really isn't even a letter anymore. It's more of a bull's head than anything. This is Lacan's point. You don't need to fucking hear him. Hell, maybe he even turned the mic down on purpose, because what's really at stake is only what he's writing on the blackboard. And where, again, is Lacan's blackboard? It's in the same place that we find the Chinese characters, namely in the margin of the text before us, which is also, again, the same place that when you set this text down and decide to walk your dog and see what the fuck is going on, as I often do, this is what you see in the stars across the night sky. You are still looking at Lacan's blackboard when you walk under the starry sky. Yet another reason to read Kant alongside Lacan. Those with ears to hear know exactly what I'm talking about. When Lacan writes an upside down capital A on the board, let's be clear, he is writing at the edge of the hole in knowledge that we've been talking about. And in so doing, he's marking this edge. He's using pure writing to measure, to verify the universal curvature that we have discussed. At issue here is not the high water mark of the real, let me be clear, but the low water mark of the symbolic. Remember, it's impossible to write universals like all women, every man, and the like. But this pronouncement, once again, this statement of impossibility that I just issued, namely that it's impossible to write universals, can absolutely be written down, formulated, observed, verified, and the like, as one more name of the real, one more instance of what we're calling real discourse. Whether we're talking about an upside down A, or if you've seen Lacan's formulas for masculine and feminine subject positions, a backwards capital E, which is also where we are headed. And again, the same is true of the big other, meta-language, the woman, the sexual relationship. They're ideas. They are not existence. An idea is never going to walk up your driveway and knock on your door. You can, following Kant, use ideas as maxims for right living. The idea of justice doesn't need to exist for you to live a life trending in its direction. Ideas are not existence. Relative to the symbolic, they don't exist. Even if, by way of the symbolic, we can designate their existence. Remember what Lacan is doing with existence. From the Greek ekstasis, standing outside. And what do we find beyond the reach of the symbolic? I believe the formulas for masculine and feminine subjectivities that Lacan is working up towards the end of Chapter 8 are all trending in this direction, toward the conceptual and experiential difference between existence in the field of the symbolic and existence, ekstasis, relative to this field. Not as its edge, per se, but really I want to cut to the chase, indeed, as it's beyond, the beyond of this existence. As we've seen in previous series, really since our series on Seminar 14, Lacan has been talking about the non-existence of the sexual act and now the sexual relationship for quite a while. He's been working at this for more than a minute. This didn't just come out of nowhere. But I want to suggest that it's really only here in Seminar 18 that Lacan really starts getting serious about the subjectivities that are bound up in this non-existence. One masculine, another feminine, and neither, hear me now, with anything whatsoever to do with human anatomy. Men and women, like fathers and mothers, are for Lacan functions, operations, subject positions. They are, let me be even more precise, they are structural operators. So what we did in previous series around the paternal function and the maternal function, the paternal figure and the maternal figure, as we transitioned from imaginary pre-Oedipal triangles to symbolic castrated squares. Here, daddy is an operation. Mommy is a held place. And these are operations that can be performed by anybody, sometimes even people that are dead and non-existent. Baby Jesus can perform the paternal function, assuming that's who your mother invokes. And your mother needn't be the one whose belly you slithered out of all those years ago. I can play the mommy. You can be the mommy. You don't need to give birth to a child in order to be its mommy. Ask any single dad. Ask any father who is deeply engaged in the life and times of their child, who the primary caregiver is in that child's life. Be the mommy and the daddy, and then talk to me about the anatomical demands of motherhood, the anatomical demands of fatherhood. For Lacan, it's not about anatomy. Moms and dads, men and women, they are subject positions that any body, if pressed in the right way, can fill. Men can become mommies. Women can become daddies. Their sons can grow up to be women, and their daughters can grow up to be men. I want to stress this so that we do not get it twisted.